To be in Boston kind of completes the geography of the strategy in developing the series.
IndyCar is an opportunity for us in the city of Boston to have 250,000 people come into the city of Boston.
He's accused of using Boston Grand Prix as his own personal piggy bank.
Failed to keep books and records, not out of ignorance, but intentionally to conceal his self-dealing and the systematic looting of Boston Grand Prix.
What a sham.
Once I accessed the FBI wiretaps that were involved in this whole process.
I wish I never got involved in the Grand Prix, and it's ruined my life.
What an utter sham. It was truly a house of cards.
This event promised to put an IndyCar race on the streets of one of America's most historic cities. But after years of turmoil, there was never a race, and a man found himself in jail. This was the Boston Grand Prix. The spring of 2012 was the start of a new era for IndyCar as the series introduced the DW12 chassis. At that same time, plans for new events were underway. In April, a promoters group was formed for the New England Grand Prix, which aimed to bring an IndyCar race to somewhere in New England. Mark Pirroni was the founder of the organization and served as its CEO. After gaining no interest from the local Boston government, the New England Grand Prix then targeted nearby Providence, Rhode Island. Throughout 2012, it was commonly thought that Providence would be added to the IndyCar schedule for 2013, reinforcing IndyCar's commitment to the Northeast as it would join a race in Baltimore and a race at Pocono in Pennsylvania. But when plans for Providence didn't come together in time for 2013, they regrouped and targeted 2015. However, after analysis, the Providence government decided the race wouldn't bring enough financial benefit and withdrew support. So in 2014, the organizer group tried Boston once again, and luckily a new mayor was in charge and open to bringing big events to the city. As momentum built in January 2015, the group brought in John F. Casey to serve as chief financial officer. Casey was a certified public accountant who owned a company which leased medical lasers to doctors. By 2015, he was the owner of an ice rink in Peabody, Massachusetts. This hiring would go on to define the story of this race. Before everyone knew what was going on, the Boston Grand Prix was an exciting idea. IndyCar could run on the streets of one of the largest and historic metropolitan areas. With interest from all sides, a deal was reached, and in May 2015, the Boston Grand Prix was officially announced to join the 2016 IndyCar schedule.
It's a great thing for the Verizon IndyCar Series to be in a big city, big market in the northeastern part of the United States. To be in Boston kind of completes the geography of the strategy in developing the series.
Well, yeah, just looking at it, it looks like a very well laid out track for passing. And that's what's important for a street course. I think street course racing is really awesome. It brings the racing to the people. People are going to love it. And, to have a race there on the East Coast, I think is really important for the series. As a driver, I love going to new street courses.
The race was to be held on Labor Day weekend, and the track through the Boston seaport would be 2.25 miles and have 11 turns.
I was extremely impressed, not only with the layout, but the location of the racetrack. Sometimes when you come into a new market, for a street circuit especially, you're not really sure what you're going to get. Sometimes it's off in a, parking lot area or something like that. And this is just fantastic to be right here on, this South Boston waterfront area, the Seaport District.
Excitement surrounded the announcement. Organizers spoke of drawing some of the 160,000 college students in the city who began classes right before Labor Day. And IndyCar CEO Mark Miles said, "Establishing IndyCar racing in the Northeast is an integral part of our strategy for growing our national fan base." By September 2015, CEO Mark Pirroni took a reduced role with the event. He gave the job to John Casey, who later testified he took the position because no one else wanted it. From this point forward, Casey acted as both CEO and CFO.
If I'm in the area, I would watch it. I wouldn't drive to come here to watch it.
I probably would not go watch it, no.
It is not something I would go to.
I like the idea of the car race coming here. I just don't like the idea of taxpayers paying for it.
I think it would be exciting. I would definitely watch, but I don't agree with it being publicly funded to a large extent.
Not everybody wants to go to this race. Not everybody wanted to see the Olympics here, so why should they have to put their tax money towards it?
If I'm not going to go to it, why pay for it?
The noise, the traffic, and if taxpayers are paying for this, I think they need to look at hungry children first and take care of their own before they start paying for a dumb car race.
Over the fall of 2015, the Grand Prix faced the typical opposition for a street course, local citizens saying they were opposed to the traffic. But when the race was announced, it was said there would be no tax dollars used. However, by the fall, it appeared the city might actually have to pay some of the costs too.
The city didn't agree to any financial commitment for the first ever Grand Prix of Boston through the seaport, but now the organizers aren't ruling out the possibility of getting some public help. Now, money for police details, temporary seating, and building out the race course are all on the table. The event would also make heavy use of the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. In return, Mayor Marty Walsh tells the Herald he expects reimbursement for the race, which could bring tens of millions of dollars to the city. But first, they have to figure out the exact amount of public money that could go into it, and that's still not known.
At the same time, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation claimed they hadn't yet issued permits to close roads for the event and only had preliminary talks with race organizers. Earlier that year, Boston tried to land the 2024 Summer Olympics. It was an unpopular idea, and the city government then had to assure the public that an IndyCar race wouldn't be similar.
IndyCar is not the Olympics. IndyCar is an opportunity for us in the city of Boston to have, over Labor Day weekend, 250,000 people come into the city of Boston to spend money in the restaurants, to stay in the hotels, to promote the city, but also have IndyCar racing in the city. I think it's no different than maybe the tall ships, bringing the tall ships in.
But a major issue arose in early 2016 when a new map designated part of the track in a flood zone, meaning they would need special permits.
Well, the planned racetrack is supposed to wind through the streets of the seaport here, but now some parts of the course have been designated a flood zone. That means they'll need to get a new permit, and that could throw the whole thing off track. Boston's Conservation Commission ruled organizers must get a wetlands permit because certain parts of the course have recently been designated a flood zone. Race promoters say that could throw the whole event off track.
From the outside, the biggest visible obstacle was public opposition. As early as the fall of 2015, some believed the race was destined to fail. This had the potential to be yet another embarrassment for IndyCar, who lost street races in Baltimore and Houston in the past years and had canceled races in China and Brazil. An October 2015 article in Racer magazine said, "If it doesn't happen, it's IndyCar, not Boston, that's going to come out of it looking bad." The series has shown signs of growth over the past couple of years, but it's still at a point where it needs to project an air of stability and competence. But what people didn't realize then is that the Boston Grand Prix was plagued not only with terrible organization that neglected to keep even basic financial records, but also alleged corruption. So after nearly a year of anticipation, the race was officially canceled on April 29th. The main reasons given by the organizers were the issues with the flood map and an inability to cover costs without financial help from the city. There was disputing claims over who called off the race, with event organizers trying to blame IndyCar for the cancellation.
Grand Prix of Boston CEO John Casey says he's certain the Labor Day weekend event would have happened had the National IndyCar organization not stepped in back in April.
We were confident that this event was going to happen right up until the last minute, until IndyCar pulled the rug out from under us.
Now, we just heard back from the National IndyCar organization. They say Casey's claim that they canceled the race is simply false. IndyCar says Casey and the organizers here made the decision, and IndyCar only became aware of it through media reports.
A Boston Grand Prix filing for bankruptcy as angry ticket holders fight to get their money back.
The group owes nearly $9 million and has just $10,000 in the bank.
When the event went to bankruptcy court, creditors argued that John Casey used the race as a personal piggy bank.
And now CEO John Casey is forced to explain in U.S. bankruptcy court what happened to all the money raised to put the race on.
I poured my heart and soul into this.
But that's not all he did. In testimony, Casey described a company spending millions with little or no oversight or traditional accounting. Money raised from investors, sponsors, and ticket buyers. By the time the race was canceled last spring,
The company had virtually nothing left in its bank accounts. So where did all the money go? Records show thousands spent on luxury boxes at the Boston Garden for a Bruins game and a Bruce Springsteen concert.
I wasn't paid that much money.
That's what Casey told 5 Investigates back in June. But under oath, he said he paid himself more than $600,000 and claims he's still owed another $377,000. That's nearly $1 million in just 18 months. Casey revealed he regularly paid his own personal bills out of company bank accounts, including $8,200 for his home mortgage and a legal bill paid on his behalf to a lawyer in Utah. The company paid for his Porsche, which he's still driving, $6,000 for 2 business suits, a BC Club membership. Boston Grand Prix even paid off a debt for one of Casey's other businesses, Laser Leasing, which had nothing to do with the race. Casey claimed in testimony that these and other payments on his behalf were actually part of his compensation. Also revealed in the bankruptcy hearing, a $200,000 gift letter from Boston Grand Prix to one of its female employees. A gift letter is exactly that, a gift, not a loan, typically used in the purchase of real estate. Casey said, "I have never seen this before in my life," but testified the employee who received it is a cousin of an old girlfriend.
The money included almost $125,000 towards his personal credit cards, $92,000 in total for his home mortgage, nearly $70,000 in payments for debts he personally owed others, $20,000 for a 2014 BMW M6 registered in his own name, almost $15,000 for an apartment that the Grand Prix never used, $100,000 towards creating an investment account in his own name. And investigators found another $862,000 in payments that Casey claimed were business expenses but had no explanation over what they were for, so investigators assumed they must also be personal. There were several $100,000 in cash withdrawals, restaurants, and concert tickets. And from the time he became CEO, the Boston Grand Prix paid all of Casey's personal credit card bills because they didn't have a business credit card. Casey also spent several $100,000 of Grand Prix funds towards other companies he owned, including truck payments owned by his laser leasing company, and $18,000 to his ice rink for investor events.
And that brings us to Casey's accounting. This is it. Just one 7-page spreadsheet obtained by 5 Investigates, with none of the transactions dated. That led to these questions from the bankruptcy trustee's attorney. There were no other books and records that Boston Grand Prix kept for the company? Casey said no. Did you keep a log of invoices that came in? No, I did not. So you kept a list of accounts payable in your head? The attorney asked Casey. Yes, he said.
It's extremely unusual for a chief financial officer of a company that's got cash flow in and out of millions of dollars to not keep books and records. What a sham. What an utter sham that this money was used for personal purposes and nobody was watching it. It was truly a house of cards.
Now, Casey also testified that Boston Grand Prix withheld employee payroll taxes, but never sent that money to the government.
Shortly after the cancellation in April, creditors alleged that Casey transferred several $100,000 from the Grand Prix accounts to his personal account so that creditors wouldn't be able to get their hands on it. In total, investigators said around 32% of all expenses the Grand Prix paid went to Casey himself or to businesses he owned. Over $1.9 million. From Casey's point of view, he claimed the compensation was reasonable and he was the victim of government politics.
Strong words from Boston Grand Prix CEO John Casey, now defending himself against accusations he looted bank accounts meant to get the race off the ground. Casey represented himself in court today and called the trustees' accusations a pile of garbage and filled with lies. I spent 3 days in depositions and the bankruptcy trustee's attorney ignored everything. He went on to say everything is on the up and up, complete transparency. The trustee claims Casey, a certified public accountant, failed to keep books and records, not out of ignorance, but intentionally to conceal his self-dealing and the systematic looting of Boston Grand Prix. Casey declined to comment as he left court here, except to say the reporting about him has been inaccurate, and he's writing a book to set the record straight.
John Casey, now representing himself in court, claimed he was subjected to a lot of extortion while trying to bring the IndyCar race to the seaport. He said business is done differently in Boston. He then told the bankruptcy court judge, like Rodney Dangerfield said in the movie Back to School, this is a fantasy land. He also told the judge he will be able to shed light on the unexplained withdrawals once I access the FBI wiretaps that were involved in this whole process. This is Dan Passacantilli. He owns his own consulting firm. This is Chris Cohane. He has a consulting firm, too. What else do they have in common? Both had access to Mayor Marty Walsh. Boston Grand Prix paid them to, among other things, secure the support of the mayor for what was to be a blockbuster event. Boston Grand Prix CEO John Casey testified Cohane and Passacantilli were given ownership shares in the race and paid because organizers believed they could get the mayor's ear.
People who were friendly with the mayor, who had previously worked for the mayor, and John Casey testified they were his conduit to the mayor. Turns out some of them actually had ownership interests in the race that were not publicly disclosed.
Attorney David Lurie represents the coalition against IndyCar Boston.
And what's your concern about that?
It's not the sort of transparent government that you want to see happen.
Was Boston Grand Prix able to buy access to you?
Boston Grand Prix failed. It didn't happen, so I don't know what kind of access it is. It didn't happen.
And Mayor Walsh says the only lack of transparency was with John Casey himself.
I give no one special treatment, and I certainly wasn't going to give the consultants for Boston Grand Prix special treatment.
The mayor says he's glad details are coming out about how Boston Grand Prix was operated. As for the consultants, there's no indication of any wrongdoing with how they were paid.
The embattled former CEO of the Boston Grand Prix in court, accused of kicking a newspaper photographer.
Mr. Casey, this is a felony.
Serious criminal charges for John Casey, assault and battery for an incident Thursday at Essex County Superior Court. Police say the former Boston Grand Prix CEO kicked a Boston Herald photographer following a court hearing about the failed race. Casey explained to us what took place.
I walked out of the courtroom and I got surrounded by reporters, and I had a little bit of a panic attack, and I did lash out, but I didn't make contact with anybody. So I think the video surveillance will exonerate me on this.
He's blaming the behavior on the stressful fallout from the Boston Grand Prix.
I'm at my breaking point. I think it's all adding up to me, So, this everything. I wish I never got involved in a Grand Prix, and it's ruined my life.
5 investigates learning tonight that the state attorney general's office has settled its case against the man right at the center of that failed bid to bring IndyCar racing to Boston. John Casey agreed to pay $50,000 in exchange for the AG dropping its civil fraud case. Casey admits no wrongdoing is part of this settlement.
For IndyCar, the collapse of the Boston Grand Prix was considered a black eye for the series, but it was also a major financial issue. By the cancellation date, the event had sold $1.7 million in tickets, which had to be refunded, and the event itself had almost no money left.
Ticket holders for the race that never happened are irate.
A ticket fee of $10.
Scott Bosselate lost $493.
I want my money. It's my money. I bought a service from you that you didn't give me, so I'm due my money back.
Why wasn't this group vetted more?
I mean, they were vetted. I mean, what it was is IndyCar National has franchisees, and this was a franchisee that came to our city. That's their operation, so that's a question you probably want to ask IndyCar National.
This is a classic instance where an entity comes to town, they market this event that they're going to put on, they take money from customers out there, sell them tickets, and then when they pull up the stakes, they leave these consumers, these customers high and dry. So we've made it clear to them that they need to refund those ticket holders immediately.
IndyCar contributed $925,000 towards refunds, which was praised by the state attorney general, who said the series went above and beyond to help the fans. They also had to quickly find a replacement for the Labor Day race. After considering a race at Gateway, IndyCar chose to rent upstate New York's Watkins Glen and promote a Labor Day event themselves.
$5,500 I have and $6,000 is where?
Starting bids for these Indy show cars bought by Boston Grand Prix for $85,000. Mark Blotner came from Newton to bid.
My wife will kill me when you see this.
Hearing no advance over 10-5, third and last call.
The first car's winning bid, $10,500.
Sold.
Blotner got the second for $7,000. What are you going to do with it?
No idea.
After settling with the Attorney General, Casey went on the offense and filed a $15 million lawsuit against the city of Boston. He claimed that the main reason the race failed was a sabotage by one City Hall official. It alleged that Austin Blackman, the chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Spaces, knew in September 2015 about a change to the flood map that would prevent the race from running on certain streets. He neglected to tell race organizers until March 2016 that they'd have to alter the track map, and by then it was too late to get the necessary permits to close the roads. It also claimed that the city backed out of an agreement to pay for road repairs and then an agreement to run the race in the Boston Convention Center parking lot after the original circuit fell through. Furthermore, Casey claimed that the mayor was pressured by a major National Democratic Party operative who wanted the race canceled. Mayor Walsh responded by saying, "The race didn't happen because John Casey is lying about every single thing." IndyCar filed a lawsuit against the Boston Grand Prix, seeking the $1.5 million sanctioning fee for 2016, a $1.6 million sanctioning fee for 2017, legal fees, and damages to IndyCar's reputation for having a canceled race. In August 2018, IndyCar won the lawsuit and was awarded $3.9 million plus $500 for reputational damages. But the race troubles continued years later for Casey as he was charged with tax evasion in September 2020.
The former chief financial officer of Boston Grand Prix was indicted today in a tax fraud scheme. Prosecutors say John Casey of Ipswich was paid more than $900,000 in 2015 and 2016, and that he failed to include those payments in the income he claimed on his personal tax returns.
Well, John Casey appeared by video from a holding cell. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. John Casey, once the head of Boston Grand Prix, was taken into custody this morning, facing 15 federal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, all tied to his personal businesses, and filing false tax returns. Boston Grand Prix paid Casey, the CEO, more than $900,000 in 2015 and 2016. But prosecutors say he laundered that money and failed to report the income on his federal tax return.
In 2021, Casey was also charged with obtaining fraudulent COVID relief funds from the government, which he used for mostly personal reasons, some of which included a diamond ring, luxury hotel stays, apartment rent, and a membership to Match.com.
The former chief financial officer of the Boston Grand Prix has been sentenced to 4 years behind bars for tax fraud. Casey pleaded guilty to several charges. A judge also sentenced him to 3 years of supervised release and ordered he pay restitution of nearly $2 million.
Building a street course event is one of the hardest promotions in auto racing because of the number of stakeholders involved. Navigating these successfully highlights the skill of the organizers. Failure highlights it even more.